The House of Representatives has impeached an official 21 times, and we have never once tabled the impeachment. Not once.
Not once have we ever blocked an impeachment trial in the Senate. But Jeff, as we tape this on April 18th, we have now. The Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, voted on April the 17th to block the impeachment trial of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And I can tell you, the Senate Republicans are fit to be tied. They are steaming mad, and we'll show you a couple of clips later in the show coming up. But Jeff, this not only, we're going to be spending time on this because, one, as Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana just said, this is unprecedented. Never before has this happened. And we will have to see what is the impact of this decision by the Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, to block the trial of Mayorkas, because they did not, in this close presidential race, in a race where so many of the Democratic senators are up for re-election this year, they did not want to have a 3-day trial with House prosecutors bringing up all the evidence of the failures of Mayorkas and the Biden administration to secure the border, and as we will hear, some of the subsequent murders and rapes and other things that are now happening within the United States.
Well, Terry, the Republicans lost the battle, but not the war. The war is the presidential election coming up on November 5, 2024, about 6 months away. That is the war. The biggest issue on everybody's mind right now is illegal immigration that we've had for almost 4 years of the Biden administration. At 4 years, it will be at least 8 to 9 million illegal immigrants essentially walking across the border, unvetted, essentially unvetted. There's been tremendous problems to this country, and the Democrats can perhaps win the battle and stop the and have, although they have an impeachment, there was no trial. So they won that battle. The trial was to feature that the Democratic Party, with the policy executed by Mayorkas, has an open border policy that has caused all this problem that Americans are seeing every night when they turn on their news in Chicago, in Denver, in New York, in Wisconsin, in all of the battleground states. Every state now is a border state. Every city is a border city. So that is the issue, and you can't hide from that. The question really is, the larger question, can the Republican Party make the case that I've just talked about persuasively, especially in the battleground states? If they can win the election, to win the presidency, they can win back the Senate, and the reason why there was no trial is because impeachment is essentially a political process, and the Democrats had the Senate 51-49. So the votes to kill this trial were by the Democrats voting politically, and that's just the way impeachment is. It was intended to essentially to be that in our Constitution.
Well, I mean, the idea is that impeachment is to remove someone for high crimes and misdemeanors. And what the Republicans are asserting, or would have asserted, is that Mayorkas has purposely not enforced the law, and so therefore is in violation of his commitment to the Constitution, and that he would faithfully execute the enforcement of the laws, that he's not doing his job, and that this is resulting in harm, physical harm, to thousands of Americans across the country. We saw in New York the immigrants, illegal immigrants, beating up police officers. We've had the murder of Laken Riley in February in Georgia. We've had a number of other deaths, and there are going to be more. This is going to go on no matter who wins in November. The impact of this open border over the last 3 years, this is going to impact America for decades. And we'll just have to see how Hopefully we can escape it. But I would remind people that it just took two brothers to set off bombs in Boston during the Boston Marathon a few years ago and kill people, and how disruptive that was, where they had to shut the entire city down. And that's just two people. And we have had tens of millions of people come in. Let me bring up the impact that this might have on the races. And here we see for the presidential race, these are the states where we are looking at that will decide the election. Places like California are going to, we know, go Democrat. Places like Missouri are going to go, we know, Republican. But in these states, it's uncertain. In all of them, except for down there, the last one, Wisconsin, where it's a dead heat, Trump now is ahead. So these are horrible numbers for Joe Biden. But we should also note, as we see at the bottom, this is plus or minus 4 points, and a number of these states are within the margin of error. So this remains, while people might get the idea Trump's ahead, this is a slam dunk, it still remains, surprisingly, a close election for president. And I think that what we and Jeff and I wish to have, ladies and gentlemen, and by the way, let me say right now, please give us your comments, because Jeff and I want to hear that and we'll respond. We'd want to know what you think, because what we want to find out is to what extent are people outraged by what happened in the Senate with the cancellation of this trial, and then maybe we'll get some kind of a read of the impact, because Jeff, we already know the border is the #1 issue. And I want to get your comments up, but first let me bring up another comment by Senator John Kennedy, that he spoke on the failures on the floor yesterday. He spoke on the failures of Mayorkas, because since the Democrats canceled the trial, Kennedy wanted to get some of the evidence on the record.
Secretary Mayorkas killed the Remain in Mexico program. He quashed contracts to build a border wall. He ended the safe third country agreements that allowed America to work with other countries to find protection for migrants in need. By tabling or dismissing the articles of impeachment without so much as a trial, my Senate Democratic colleagues will be endorsing the Biden administration's lawless approach to the southern border. They will be setting a precedent that the next administration can ignore the laws of Congress and the will of the American people, too.
So there it is, Senator John Kennedy, Louisiana, trying to lay out a little bit of the information, what he saw as the blunders that have led to this situation, this crisis at the border.
Well, Terry, here's the issue. We've just seen that with Senator John Kennedy. And as he said, Mayorkas executed the policy of the Democrats and Joe Biden to open our borders. His job as Homeland Security Secretary was to kill, to prevent the wall from finishing the wall, which would have prevented these folks from walking across the border. His job was to remain in their own country when they were applying for asylum. His job was to make sure there were so many people coming across the border that's why you couldn't detain these people while the asylum hearings were going ahead. His job was to let the Biden administration fly thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands people, illegal immigrants, into our country so they don't have to walk across the border. These are things most Americans don't know much about, although they're seeing the problems in their cities across the country. And so the Republicans wanted a trial, and the usual precedent, there is a trial when impeachment occurs. There are facts, there are witnesses, there's a presentation. That was all blocked. And it was blocked by Schumer. In a sense, he outplayed the Republicans, because the votes that he brought about was to say, it didn't dismiss the charges. It didn't say that this was not a legitimate claim. It simply said the Democrats would play Supreme Court, and they held these articles of impeachment as unconstitutional. That's what the votes were. This was a judicial this was a judicial action taken by politicians. 51 Democrats decided that these articles of impeachment were unconstitutional, and they said that because the Constitution requires high crime and misdemeanor. They said that requires a bribery or something of that type, or treason. And the point is, this goes back to Bill Clinton. We started weaponizing impeachment. We did that with Clinton. Republicans did that. The Democrats then did that with Trump. And now the Republicans were trying to weaponize this, because this, in the technical sense of impeachment, was not an impeachable offense, just like the others weren't, just like Trump wasn't. So, and the Democrats won this because, as I said, impeachment is a political process. A conviction requires 2/3 vote.
Look, what's going to happen?
Political process.
We know that Mayorkas would not have been removed from office, just as Trump wasn't, because the votes weren't there for removal.
Right.
But it would have been a trial to lay out the evidence against Mayorkas, against the Biden administration, and that would have been disastrous. So I can just imagine Chuck Schumer in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, them scratching their heads, trying to say, "What are we going to do? We cannot have 3 days of this nationally televised where the Republicans from the House are coming over and laying out evidence against the Biden administration on this open border, when we already have." The American people have expressed through any number of polls that the fact that this open border is outraging people, and as you and I have talked about before, it's eating into the foundational support of the Democratic Party. They're losing black votes. They're losing Hispanic votes. So this would have been a disaster, and they decided to punt. Now, Jeff, interestingly, and the timing is delicious, especially that you and I get to talk about this. So the vote was last night to table the impeachment. Today, and this was already planned well ahead of time, Mayorkas is testifying before the Homeland Security Committee, and of course the Republicans, fit to be tied, were hunting for bear, and this is a couple. We're going to play a couple of bites. Let's start with Ron Johnson, Senator of Wisconsin, who's laying out his thoughts about the disaster going on at the border.
Do you admit that your actions have resulted in the deaths and the murders and the assaults of thousands of Americans? I've got the CBP statistics here. Assault and battery up 5.7 times over the last 3 years what it was in 2020. Homicide up 17 times. Again, these are from keep people in this country illegally. Sexual offenses up 2.5 times. Again, that's the direct result of your actions, of President Biden's actions, quite honestly, of actions of Democrats in the Senate who refused to vote to complete the wall, which would have helped.
There you go, Ron Johnson, and as he laid out, just the crimes from the immigrants just on assault up 5-fold.
Well, Terry, this ties in with a general issue, excuse me, general presidential election issue of crime. Crime in America is still going up. Democrats are trying to claim across the country, oh, we've cured the crime problem, it's going down. Some aspects of crime are going down, but in general, crime is still going up. And part of that's the point that Senator Johnson is making, is due to this open border policy, because now various countries are just emptying their jails, emptying their mental institutions. And now we're dealing with these big people because there's no vetting, there's no checking for walking across the border. We have rampant illegal immigration of people who are a danger to this country, criminal danger, national security danger. That's the point.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, this is impacting, as you said earlier in the show, it's been said before, every state now is a border state. We see the crime happening in Chicago. We see the cost of taking care of these illegal immigrants, and it's no wonder that this is the #1 issue. It's impacting everything from our schools to our hospitals to our police. And what we just heard there from Senator Johnson. This is the kind of thing that we would have heard had there been a trial. So this is where the Republican senators now had a chance to lay out an indictment, to lay out some of the information that would have been presented. Let's listen also to Senator Hawley from that same committee hearing today, April 18th, as he laid out a series of blunders that led to the death of Laken Riley.
He had a criminal record to start with. He's in the country on illegal grounds. You have falsely and illegally allowed him in. He commits a crime against a child. He's not prosecuted. It's expunged. In November, get this, in November, Ibarra files an application for employment authorization. And unbelievably, on December the 9th, 2023, it's approved. So this is your policies in action, Mr. Secretary. A criminal is permitted into this country on grounds flatly not permitted, flatly contradictory to the statute. He commits a crime against a child, and then he gets a work permit. He gets a work permit. You want to know why all of the jobs in the last 2 or 3 years have gone to illegal migrants? Working people in this country can't get a job. Their unemployment rate's high. Why? Because of things like this. And then what's he do? Well, we all know. Then in February, he commits the heinous crime against Laken Riley.
And there you go, Senator Josh Hawley, no fan of Mayorkas. Hawley has called for Mayorkas to resign for over the last year when he has had Mayorkas appear before his committees.
Well, look, Hawley's just pointing out another aspect in which the country has gone off the rails. We are letting these illegals in, and they are illegal. They are unvetted. It's not thought out as an appropriate process. And it's all being caused by the Democratic Party. And so when Laken Riley, a sophomore, I think, in college in Georgia, when she is murdered by somebody who shouldn't be here, who could have been arrested before the murder because he had violated the law and he had applied for a work permit, and we're giving him, it's not a laughable matter, I'm laughing, giving a person a work permit who ends up killing somebody. Yes, there'll be a trial. Yes, you could say he's got a presumption of innocence, but it's pretty damn clear where the evidence is pointing. And this is just one case. There are dozens, there are tens of thousands. We don't know how many. There are 24,000 Chinese nationals who've come into this country just in this last year. If we were vetting it all, if we didn't have an open border policy, they wouldn't even be close to coming in. What are they here for, these Chinese nationals? Are they being liberated? Are they being politically persecuted? Or is China taking advantage of one of the stupidest acts the Americans had ever done? Could you imagine if we could send 25,000 Americans into China?
Jeff, I have the statistics just off camera here. Chinese nationals apprehended from 2021 to 2024. So over the last 3 years of the Biden administration, up 7,000%. Up 7,000%. In 2023, there were 24,125. That's last year. 24,125 Chinese nationals. Thus far this year, in 2024, 24,300. So as many have come in just so far this year in 2024, Chinese nationals, as all of last year, and that's 49,000 Chinese nationals. Again, as you say, what the hell are they doing here? I don't think they're coming here just to open up new restaurants. I mean, this is a national security issue. It's not to indict everyone who's a Chinaman or anyone else, but we don't know who these people are. We don't know what they're doing here.
China is a strategic, not competitor, a strategic enemy of the United States, a military threat, an economic threat. It's a military threat because it is an economic threat. That means they have the economic strength to prepare munitions that are a danger to this country. And they have the economic ability to do that because they're growing in their economic power. And therefore we know it's a strategic threat. Why would you open up your borders to these folks? Why would you say, come and do as you will? National security threat. It makes no sense. And as we'll see as we go on in the show, the crime policies across the country They make no sense. We want to arrest people who do illegal things. We want to prosecute those folks. We want to sentence them. We want to put them in jail. Democratic prosecutors essentially across the country have decided there will be virtually no consequences for many felonies, many severe violent acts. All I'm saying is this illegal immigration policy that for which Mayorkas should have been impeached. The real person you want to impeach for that would be Joe Biden.
And that's the ultimate impeachment, is the vote in November. But it's not just about the presidential race. I mean, the other thing, as you and I have talked about, and let me bring up a slide here. These are the states where there are going to be Senate races. And those in blue are where Democrats are running for re-election. And the red states, obviously, are the Republicans. The Republicans, as you and I have talked about earlier, will almost surely pick up control of the Senate. But what Chuck Schumer was trying to do by canceling this is try to hold on to some of those states where the Democrats are behind. And again, this is we saw this already, but this is where we are going to have a number of Trump is ahead, and we see in Arizona that's a Democratic state. In Georgia, there is no election this year in Georgia, but there is in Michigan, there is in Pennsylvania, and there is in Wisconsin. And so we could have a Senate vote where the Republicans could have a comfortable lead. So even if Joe Biden were to pull out a re-election with the Republicans having control of the Senate, and it could be 54 Republican seats, and if, that means that they could block any of Biden's agenda for the second term. They could block his appointments. The Republicans having the Senate gives them power that they haven't had in the first Biden administration. Obviously, the Republicans are hoping it's going to be a Trump administration come November.
And to be specific very quickly, there are 7 states that Cook and Associates, that a neutral organization has assessed 7 states where their Democrats are leading, which is not a very strong position of current positions that they have the Senate. So 7 in which they're leading, or they're toss-ups. So some examples of those, 5 of those are Casey in Pennsylvania.
Hang on one second, Jeff. Let me just bring up. So go ahead.
Casey in Pennsylvania, Rosen in Nevada, Tester in Montana, Baldwin in Wisconsin, Sherrod Brown in Ohio. 5 states right there that Republicans have a very good shot at. As you said, the big picture is there are 24 states that Democrats are defending in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate, in this election coming up. There are only 11 that Republicans are defending, and almost none of them are good shots for Democrats to pick up. So, if they pick up 5, and I forgot to mention, of course, the sure pickup is Manchin in West Virginia.
Because Manchin's not running. So that, and let me also point out that the Republicans could pick up Maryland over there on the Eastern Seaboard with Larry Hogan, who is a very popular Republican governor, and he's the Republican nominee. We'll have to see how that goes. I think you mentioned Kari Lake. She's in a tough race, but the odds are, because Trump is ahead in Arizona, that will also help Kari Lake, who came close to winning the governorship 2 years ago, now that she could join the Senate.
It's an open seat. It's an open seat because Sinema, the incumbent, isn't running again in Arizona. So you've just added Maryland. You've just added Arizona. I've gone from 5 to 7. I throw in Manchin. That's 1 more. That's 8. They're at 49 now. That's a potential. They go from 49 Republican senators to 57. That becomes a 57 a split with 57-43. They're getting pretty darn close to the 60 to control the Senate, where they can pick off, if hopefully on some issues Democrats would join them. So we're looking at a major reaction, if you want to put it, major change.
If you have 60 votes in the Senate,
election.
you cannot have a filibuster because the Senate can vote to end the filibuster. And that's why that matters.
So quickly, to balance this out, excuse me.
Let me add one thing first to say also that if the Republicans pick up the Senate, and they will, right now the House is controlled by the Republicans by one vote because of some recent resignations from the Republican caucus. But almost surely the Republicans would pick up and hold the House if the sentiment is as it is today. That's why what we're talking about is so important. The ramifications of what happened yesterday, the ongoing murder and mayhem and criminal activity and cost to our schools, hospitals, etc., of this illegal immigration. And Jeff, you and I haven't even talked about the economy because this is shining a light on the border like nothing else. So
well, the point is,
whoever wins, if Biden wins, he almost surely is going to have a Republican Congress in both houses.
But the issues they're running on, which include many local issues or previously thought to be local issues, are illegal immigration, number one, inflation, number two, job growth not being what it should be. There may be job growth, but it's not what it should be. Number three, not the kinds of jobs. Crime, number four, public school failures, millions across the country of minorities, of blacks and browns not being taught how to read. So they're going to see a good chance of the growth that started in the Republican Party of representation of blacks and browns get stronger. On the foreign policy side, China is a major issue. Fentanyl relating to illegal immigration being brought in from China essentially into the United States. Russia, major war that shouldn't have happened. Iran, we're now going to be close to a war because of the ridiculous attitude of our president with regard to Israel.
And Jeff, I don't know how it is up there in Chicago. It's probably, gasoline's probably close to $5 up there. I mean, it's close to $4 a gallon here in Springfield. And every time people go to the gas station, they're reminded of how cheap it was under Trump and how it's now busting middle-class families' budgets.
The failing institutions, the decay of our colleges and universities. We've seen this again at USC out in California, University of Southern California, that they had a valedictorian who was scheduled to be the valedictorian. It so happens this valedictorian had said, written elsewhere, that Israel shouldn't exist. You should abolish Israel. This is what many people say. What the Palestinians want is not a two-party solution, a one-party solution. Send the Israelis, send the Jews somewhere else. Send them to Arizona. They've even said things like this. This is bizarre to happen at USC. We've seen what's happened at Harvard, at MIT, at Penn, yesterday at Columbia. The administrators cannot be depended on to say simple things like genocide of Jews is not allowed by, that advocacy is not allowed by our speech code. It's a violation. They're troubled to say that.
You know, we did just have some administrators yesterday questioned in Congress, and this time they got the answer right. They said, yes, it violates our standards.
They didn't show on all stations. They got other answers wrong, where they're not dealing with anti-Semitism. They're reluctant to do so. They're not dealing with their deans who are worse than their students. No, they didn't get them all right.
Well, and we'll have to. I just meant this time on that same question as what costs other people their job.
Right,
they answer
got one question right.
Right. We'll have to see too. They're losing the black vote? They're losing the Hispanic vote. We'll have to see what the Jewish vote ends up being in light of this craziness. Jeff, thanks as always. We're going to bring up more issues in the future, but for now, we'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.